Please note this podcast discusses real-life crimes and may include sensitive topics such as violence, abuse, and other disturbing content. We recommend listener discretion.
Kevin Parle is a very, very useful asset to serious and organised crime. Not only is he a 6'5" lump, but he could have killed 2 people. So if you are part of the global organised illegal drugs industry, he's a very handy fella to take when you sit down and have a negotiation with someone. Because you will say to them, and here's my mate Kev. Now, you're really not going to muck us about here, are you?
I'm journalist Helen Fospero.
I'm crime reporter Martin Brunt.
And this is True Criminals.
A journey into the darkest corners of the criminal underworld, with insights from decades of true crime reporting.
The stories behind the stories, plus exclusive interviews with those closely involved in notorious cases.
Re-examining crimes so shocking, they still haunt our imaginations.
In this episode, the story of a young mother's murder in Liverpool, which led to a 20-year manhunt. When 22-year-old Lucy Hargreaves was shot dead in her home in 2005, police immediately suspected a man named Kevin Parle. He's 6'5" with ginger hair and a distinctive scar on his face, hard to miss. Yet 2 decades later, Parle is still at large. We'll have an exclusive interview with former Metropolitan Police Detective Peter Bleksley, who's got closer to the truth about this case than anyone, making it his personal mission to hunt down Britain's most wanted man. Martin, you covered the case when it began back in 2005 as Sky's crime correspondent. What are your memories of it?
They are vivid. It was early August 2005. when the news came through that a young mum had been killed in her own home in Walton, Liverpool. And it really was one of the most horrific crimes I've covered, and I've covered a few. Lucy Hargreaves was a 22-year-old mother of 3 young children, and she was shot in her home while she was asleep on her sofa. The killers then set the duvet she was lying under on fire. It was shocking, the shell of that burned-out living room, the disbelief on neighbours' faces about what had been done.
The sheer brutality of it stood out, didn't it? The kind of crime that's so difficult to comprehend.
Indeed, Liverpool's no stranger to violent crime. I've covered lots of awful stories up there, but this felt quite different. Lucy was an ordinary young mum, not involved in any crime. I remember there were police officers at the scene being visibly angry and upset at what had been done to her. It shook them up, it shook everybody up.
Let's talk through exactly what happened and then how Kevin Parle fits into this. Take us back to that night.
The date was the 3rd of August 2005. Lucy Hargreaves lived with her partner, Gary Campbell, and their children. They lived on Lambourne Avenue in Walton, Liverpool. In the early hours of the morning, Lucy had fallen asleep on the sofa downstairs. Her 2-year-old daughter was asleep upstairs with Gary. Sometime around 3 a.m, 3 armed men burst into the house. They found Lucy sleeping in the front room. They opened fire on her at close range. She was shot multiple times with a shotgun as she lay under the duvet. The gunshots, not surprisingly, woke up Gary upstairs.
It's really difficult to imagine, Martin, waking up to gunfire in your house, and their little girl was up there too, wasn't she?
Yes, she was a toddler. Gary grabbed their daughter and managed to escape out of an upstairs window onto the roof. And then he dropped down to the ground outside to get away. And as he's doing that, the attackers downstairs doused the sofa and Lucy's duvet with petrol and unbelievably set them on fire. They essentially set the house ablaze to destroy evidence, while Lucy's body was still there on the sofa.
And despite the flames, Gary tried to get back in to save Lucy.
He did, very bravely. Once he'd got their child to safety outside, Gary desperately tried to get back into the burning house to reach Lucy. But by then it was too late. The fire was spreading too quickly. Neighbours were waking up, seeing flames and smoke. They called the emergency services, and by the time the fire was out, Lucy Hargreaves had died from her gunshot wounds and the fire. It was obvious that this was a targeted killing made to look like an arson.
A cold-blooded murder, and initially people must have been baffled. Why Lucy?
Exactly, why this young mum with no apparent enemies? At first glance, it made absolutely no sense. Lucy had no involvement in crime. But very soon a theory emerged. The real target, according to the theory, was her partner, Gary Campbell. Now, Gary was known to police. There was an allegation that he'd been a passenger in a stolen car about 12 years earlier, in the early 1990s, a car that had hit and killed a young boy. Gary had always denied he was driving that car. But on the street, and this is perhaps what really counts, there were rumours of grudges about that old incident. The theory is that someone, possibly connected to that dead boy's family, or just underworld figures with a score to settle, wanted revenge on Gary Campbell for the child's death.
So are we thinking then that they went after him but discovered Lucy instead when they broke into the house?
It looks like that. I think that's the police theory, that these men believed Gary would be at home downstairs. Instead, of course, they found Lucy on the couch, but they showed absolutely no mercy. They killed her and tried to burn the evidence. Lucy was simply in the wrong place when these killers broke in.
It's unbelievably sad, isn't it, that Lucy left behind 3 children, her 2-year-old and 2 older children. And of course, her family members, they lost a daughter, a sister, a mum, and in the most horrific way.
As you would expect, Merseyside police threw everything they had at this case. They arrested several suspects. In fact, over the years, a total of 21 people have been arrested in connection with Lucy's murder, but not one of them has been convicted.
21 arrests and no convictions in 20 years. That seems incredible.
There was a court case in 2007. 2 young men, Anthony Downs and Kirk Bradley, were prosecuted for Lucy's murder, but the trial collapsed and they were freed. A judge ruled that there was insufficient evidence to carry on. But that's been the story of this case. Lots of leads, many arrests, but no justice yet for Lucy. Later, those 2 young men, Downs and Bradley, did end up in jail, but for something else. They were convicted of running a Liverpool guns-for-hire gang that carried out shootings and grenade attacks on underworld rivals.
And right from the very beginning, another name loomed large. Kevin Parle. Tell us about Kevin Parle.
Kevin Thomas Parle, born in Liverpool, 25 years old at the time Lucy was killed. He was quickly identified by police as a prime suspect in organising or carrying out this attack. And Parle was already on the police radar before Lucy's murder. He was wanted for another killing in Liverpool, the shooting of a 16-year-old boy named Liam Kelly in June 2004, about a year earlier.
So Parle is suspected in 2 murders, Liam Kelly in 2004 and Lucy Hargreaves in 2005.
Yes, and Liam Kelly's case gives some insight into the kind of criminal world Parle was involved in. Liam was a 16-year-old boy from Dingle, Liverpool. In June 2004, about a year before Lucy's murder, Liam was lured to a street in Dingle and ambushed. He was shot in the arm and chest and collapsed while trying to escape into a house. Liam died at the scene. And all of this, shockingly, was over a debt of just £200, a trivial amount. Liam reportedly owed it to a man named Anthony Campbell, no relation to Gary, as far as we know. And Campbell arranged a hit on the teenager. Campbell, that's Anthony Campbell, pleaded guilty to arranging the hit on Liam and is serving a life sentence still. But in court it was alleged that he had hired Kevin Parle to be the gunman. Parle was also called Hemp on the streets and known to Merseyside police as a dangerous character long before Lucy's murder.
Was Parle ever arrested, Martin, in connection with Liam Kelly's murder?
Yes, he was. Parle had been arrested and questioned in 2004 about Liam's killing, but he was released on bail while police continued their inquiries.
And Parle, a fugitive on bail for Liam's murder when Lucy Hargreaves was killed. Then, after Lucy's death, in August 2005, Parle disappeared without a trace, seemingly.
After Lucy was killed, detectives believe Parle got out of the UK soon after, probably using a false passport. From that moment, late 2005, Kevin Parle effectively became a ghost.
And all these years, while he's allegedly on the run, Lucy's family have been waiting for justice, hoping for justice. They've made numerous appeals, haven't they, over the years?
They have, but her family have mostly kept out of the spotlight. They're very private and dignified people. A few years ago, I interviewed Lucy's dad, but he insisted it was done anonymously, and I think that says a lot about the fear amongst people in Liverpool. On various anniversaries of her death, the family do release statements pleading for anyone with information to come forward. This year, which marked 20 years since Lucy's murder, her family said this in a statement: "The way we lost Lucy is not something families can ever truly come to terms with. It is still incredibly difficult and painful to think about." They also directly appeal to anyone who might know where Kevin Parle is or what happened to speak up now. They said, now is the time.
It's really heartbreaking to listen to, and 20 years on, her parents and children still have no, I hate the word closure, but it's, I think, needed in this context, no closure.
Yes, it's astonishing that a suspect identified so quickly could evade capture for so long. At this point, Parle should be about 45 years old. Merseyside police say the hunt for him remains very much active. On the 20th anniversary of the killing just gone, the head of Merseyside's Serious Crime Review Unit, Howard Rubery, publicly stressed that, quote, "the hunt for Kevin Parle is very much on." He also made it clear that the police were still looking for evidence of the other two alleged killers. There's a 2-year police review of the investigation going on. Mr. Rubery also reminded everyone that Lucy Hargreaves was, quote, "an absolutely innocent victim, not from a family of criminality," emphasising that her loved ones deserve answers. And just recently, the independent charity Crime Stoppers renewed a £10,000 reward for information that leads to Kevin Parle's capture. They're really urging anyone who knows anything to speak up, anonymously if needed. After 2 decades, it seems they're not giving up.
It sounds like the police haven't stopped looking, but sometimes it takes something extra in cases like this, and that's where our next guest comes in. In 2019, frustrated by the lack of progress, retired Scotland Yard detective Peter Bleksley took on the case as a personal mission, effectively picking up where official investigations had stalled. Peter spent 4 years chasing leads across Europe and created a podcast series, Manhunt, Finding Kevin Parle, determined to raise awareness and find this fugitive when official efforts had stalled. And I'm delighted to say that Peter joins us on the show. Peter, welcome to True Criminals.
Thank you for having me.
You're a retired Scotland Yard detective. What drew you to take on this hunt for Kevin Parle?
My original motives, if we rewind back to 2019, if we may, I'd left a television show which was called Hunted. It was on Channel 4 at the time, and we hunted pretend fugitives, members of the public. It was a reality show. It was a game. It was a laugh. It was all that kind of stuff. But it raised my profile. And I was thinking, what's going to be my next major project? Would it be another book or another play? What was I going to do? And I thought, well, my profile's been raised through hunting pretend fugitives, so why not use that and hunt a real one? Coupled with the fact that I've got a pretty good network of people from law enforcement and the such like. And so that all kind of made sense. So on the 29th of April, I think it was 2019, I held a press conference in Fleet Street. We rented a small premises and people turned up. The Press Association were there. Danny Shaw, who was at the BBC at the time, was there. Some national newspapers were there. That was great. And my motivation was to get Kevin Parle's name out there. Because if he is still alive, he's lived an absolute charmed life when you look at the crimes that he's wanted for. The shooting dead of a 16-year-old kid and then the shooting dead of a 23-year-old mother of 3 young children, who, according to everybody I've met, was an absolute angel. So he should have been the subject of so much true crime material. His name should have been everywhere. People should have known him. He should have been on far more billboards than he ever has been. So that was my motivation for trying to find him. Hence a press conference, hence my personal quest.
Peter, a lot of the media focus has been on the hunt for Kevin Parle and the murder of Lucy Hargreaves, and it's sometimes easy to forget in this case that there was the earlier murder of 16-year-old Liam. Tell us about what happened to him.
Yeah, a kid. He's wanted for the murder of a kid. Can we all please remember that? Liam was a lively young lad. So was I when I was 16. Bit of a lad he was. Not to everybody's liking. Everton fan. Borrowed a couple of £100. And can you believe it? It was over that debt that essentially he was murdered. He threw a bike through somebody's window. And this is how the whole situation escalated, to the point whereby a man called Anthony Campbell called Liam on to a meeting in Grafton Street in the Dingle part of Liverpool. And Liam went to this meet that he was called on to. Out of a vehicle stepped a gunman with a shotgun and shot young Liam dead. I've been to Grafton Street a number of times. The impact that crime had on this beautiful little street of terraced houses was significant and lasts to this day, over 20 years later. You speak to people that lived there then, they will tell you about it. You speak to people that have moved in subsequently, they will tell you they've heard about it. And when I've gone there and laid flowers and attached posters to railings, no one's come out and cut them down. Everybody's left them there. People have been wonderful. And there's still a very strong sense of how wrong his murder was and how much people would like to see further resolution of it.
And what makes people think that Kevin Parle is the suspect for Liam's murder?
In the early days of the investigation, Kevin Parle was arrested for the crime and put in a cell. But then somebody made the catastrophic decision to bail him because at the time they didn't have enough evidence.
Peter, you started gathering intelligence and even travelled abroad in the early days of your hunt for, or your attempts to pick up his trail. Tell us about the Spanish connection, because I went there looking for him, and you did too. What did you find?
I think we both went to Torrevieja, a certain holiday resort down there. And we spoke to a lot of people.
Big expat community.
Oh, yes, and some people live there permanently. There's bungalow-type places that people live in there.
I know a couple of ex-cops who live there as well. There are so many British expats down there.
Yeah, and a sizable Scouse community, of course. And we spoke to one person who had interacted with Kevin Parle a lot. And this is the period when he is wanted by the police. He's been arrested and he's been bailed for the Liam Kelly shooting. Lucy has also been murdered. But the hunt for him hadn't really been widely publicised. So he's down there, and really he spent a lot of time down there. He had a girlfriend. He moved freely, he had a drink, he was a larger-than-life character. And not so long after he left there, overnight, suddenly he just disappeared. Murder squad detectives from Merseyside turned up and spoke to various people. And we spoke to people that had spoken to Kevin Parle and the Merseyside detectives. And they were saying, you're too late, you've missed him. So that was really a golden opportunity.
It sounds like he's always been just out of reach, but how has he managed to stay hidden for so long?
Look at the crimes he's wanted for. 16-year-old kid, 23-year-old, mother of 3 young kids. Okay, if, and I say if because he's not been charged or convicted of these crimes, if he has committed both those crimes, which were both carried out with shotguns, Kevin Parle is a very, very useful asset to serious and organised crime. Not only is he a 6'5" lump, but he could have killed 2 people. So if you are part of the global organised illegal drugs industry, he's a very handy fella to take when you sit down and have a negotiation with someone. Because you will say to them, and here's my mate Kev. Now, you're really not going to muck us about here, are you? You're not going to try and steal our money or palm us off with moody gear, because if you do, my mate Kev might get a bit cross, and you know what he's like when he's got a gun in his hands. Right? A very useful asset. And if he is still alive, that is because he is still an asset to global, serious and organised crime.
So he's had help?
Oh, hugely. Of course, help to leave the country, help to stay on the run for as long as he did. Undoubtedly. He was an asset. Funnily enough, in the early days of his criminal activity, because he came from the leafy and rather greener south side of Liverpool, the proper tough nuts from Croxteth, Toxteth, Norris Green, the Nogger, and those kind of places, thought he was a bit of a posh soften, to be perfectly frank with you. And he wasn't roundly trusted by them in the early days.
He went to a private school, didn't he, at one stage?
He did indeed, and I've been to those schools. And it's a very nice part of that amazing city. If he killed Liam Kelly, I'm convinced he did it to earn his spurs, to prove himself, to show that he was worthy of greater respect than he'd previously been given.
There's one suggestion that keeps coming back, that he was killed by criminals in London after robbing drug dealers, or that he was murdered and buried in Spain while on the run there. What do you think of those theories?
Certain senior detectives in private say he's dead. And they base their thinking that he's dead on what I think is fairly flimsy evidence. One is that he did not appear anywhere during the EncroChat inquiries. Now, EncroChat, of course, we know that encrypted telephone system that so many gangsters around the world used for a very long time. And when law enforcement hacked into it, of course, it brought about hundreds upon hundreds of investigations around the world, numerous convictions, the seizing of hundreds of tons of drugs and guns and all manner of stuff. But Kevin Parle, I am told, did not feature anywhere in EncroChat.
And you would have expected him to?
Certainly senior detectives from Merseyside Police expected him to.
But he could be dead, couldn't he? There's always speculation around figures like him, particularly after so many years.
Chopped into little pieces and thrown over the side of a boat. And so these kind of rumours go on and on and on. And I've heard just about most of them.
It's in his interest, perhaps, to spread those rumours.
Very much so. It's exactly the kind of rumour you want going around. And over the years, of course, I have put up hundreds of flyers, laminated posters, attaching them to lampposts, notice boards, undercar, windscreen wipers, railings, you name it. I've put up hundreds of those around Liverpool, various places in Spain that I've been to, one that was very relevant, and I'll come on to that if I may in a minute. And whilst doing so, and doing them very prominently with cable ties and all of that in Liverpool, I've heard it on a number of occasions. People have walked up to me and they've gone, "He's dead, mate. You're wasting your time. He's dead." And that is exactly the kind of rumour that I'm sure he would want people to be spreading about.
After a long day of recording true criminals, reviewing case files and conducting interviews, I like to unwind by streaming a favourite show or checking out a new series. But when I travel abroad, access to my usual streaming services can become limited. Many platforms restrict content based on location, leaving subscriptions I pay for at home inaccessible. Surfshark VPN provides a straightforward solution. By connecting to a server in your home country, it allows access to shows, movies, and news outlets that would otherwise be blocked. This makes it easier to stay connected to the content you normally enjoy, no matter where you are. Another practical feature is the ability to compare prices across different regions. Many online services, airlines, hotels, and digital subscriptions adjust costs based on location. Using a VPN to check prices from multiple regions can help identify lower rates, offering potential savings while travelling. Surfshark also supports multiple devices with a single subscription. This means laptops, phones, tablets, and even other household devices can be protected simultaneously, reducing the need to manage multiple accounts. For those concerned about privacy beyond streaming, Surfshark offers Surfshark Search, a private search engine that doesn't track activity, show ads, or target users based on search history. This can be particularly useful for sensitive online research or maintaining general digital privacy. Surfshark VPN provides tools to access content, manage costs, and maintain privacy while online. Head to surfshark.com/truecriminals or use the code TrueCriminals at checkout to get 4 extra months of Surfshark VPN. Where's the key place in Spain that you're going to come on to?
Okay, well, amongst the many trips to Spain that I've made in the last few years, going to places like not only Torrevieja, Torremolinos, Fuengirola, and many other places down in the Costas, the most significant piece of information that I received was that he had been seen at a meeting of criminals at a villa on a place called Val del Este, which is a very nice resort built amongst and around a golf course. Very nice, very well maintained, a variety of flats, villas, bungalows, all of that, restaurants, bars, a couple of estate management offices, estate agents, all of that. And we met a source very, very covertly who was extremely nervous. When I say we, I mean me and my podcast producer, who told us about this meeting that took place at this villa. I managed to identify who the owner of that villa was, and we did eventually go there. But before we went there, I did a lot of investigative work. The owner of that villa was a man who had been arrested previously, some years before, and served a bit of time, was arrested with a former Metropolitan Police Detective Sergeant who was corrupt and actually had been a neighbour of mine. Used to live just up the road from me, a bloke called Mick Daly. Now, Mick Daly left the Metropolitan Police under a cloud, got himself arrested for a drug importation, did a bit of time for that, and then got himself arrested in connection with a vast drug importation, about 1.5 tons of cocaine, off the coast of Dunloch Bay in Ireland. And the rib collapse that they had when they were trying to cooper the drugs from the main vessel onto this rib and all of that. People went into the water. It was a complete pig's ear. And actually, it's rather hysterical because the whole error was born out of putting the wrong fuel in the engines. They should have put petrol in and they put diesel in, or the other way round, right? Hysterical. Real Keystone Villains stuff.
I remember the footage of great bales of cocaine floating in the sea.
Bobbing around in the Irish Sea. Yeah. And I've been to Dunloch Bay as part of the research for trying to find Parle, because there's a link between that importation, the man that got nicked with Mick Daly, and the property at Val del Este where we were told Parle had been seen. You see, I spent 4 years of my life joining all these dots up, travelling wherever I had to go to do exactly that, join the dots up, get in front of someone who was going to say, all right, he's down there. Right? That was the whole wildest dream plan. So as part of that, we end up going to Val del Este. And this villa was, don't conjure up too grand an idea when I say villa. It wasn't a sprawling villa with huge swimming pools and acres of land. It was more kind of like a small house on the end of a terrace of small holiday homes. But it had the walls extended, okay, to make them higher so they couldn't be overseen. It was at the highest point of this entire estate, including the golf course, so it had the best panoramic views from cameras of anything that would be approaching, anybody come in there. It was the criminal hideout that you'd want. if that was it. Anyway, I was told Parle had been there. Weapons had been there, okay, including a Glock and another handgun. Global drug dealing was discussed. Parle was definitely there, but Parle didn't live there. I was told Parle had a flat elsewhere on the estate, and by comparing maps and speaking to the source, we were able to narrow down a row of about half a dozen flats that we believed Parle lived in. Anyway, all this work that I'd done, travelling widely, speaking to countless people, the information that came my way was an absolute torrent in the early days of the hunt for Parle. I compiled it all into an intelligence dossier, if you will, package, of which there are over 135 points of interest as I saw it, and I submitted it all to Merseyside Police. But I said I wanted to present it to them so that I could bring it to life a bit more than as I tried to do on the page. Of course, we had the pandemic in the midst of all this, and they arranged for us eventually, against much indifference and disinterest from Merseyside Police, I hasten to add, we eventually arranged a meeting. So me and my podcast producer, laptops, recording devices, all of that, get on the train, pulling out of Euston Station in London. We're about 20 minutes into the journey up to Liverpool Lime Street Station, and guess what? They cancelled it, right? They really didn't want to meet us. Well, I wasn't taking no for an answer. So we got back in touch with them. We said, well, look, we're on our way. We're on a train. We can't stop and go back now. Let's do it remotely. And against some pushback, I shall say, we managed to find a premises that we could get into and whereby we could deliver this remotely. So I did. And I sat down in front of this DCI, and there were some other people, and I delivered my presentation to them. Little, if nothing, in return from them.
No reaction?
Nothing I can remember.
I can imagine most police forces probably felt slightly affronted at not only a retired detective trying to tell them how to do their job, but somebody from the Met. How dare you? Do you think there was an element of that?
I never told them how to do their job. I met with a detective chief inspector and a detective inspector very early on in the hunt, very early on. And I said, look, I'm using my profile to put it out there to try and raise his profile and see if we can help. I said, we're not here to embarrass anybody, at which the detective inspector leant forward and growled at me. He said, rest assured, you won't embarrass us. And we thought that was very interesting. So do they know he's dead then? Is that the subtext to what he's saying? Possibly. Any time information came into me, I would anonymise it, of course, so they didn't know my sources, and I passed it straight on to them. I played it exactly how I should play it. But largely, all we got back was indifference. So back to that dossier, I submitted that, and we waited, and we waited, and I chased, and I tried to follow up, because I didn't want to know details of any operation they might have done. Okay, that's fine for them to be operationally secret, but the answer, have you been to those premises, a yes or no, wouldn't hurt. And I didn't even get that. After 18 months, I discovered they'd done nothing with that.
But why, Peter, do you think that there doesn't seem appetite to find him, if indeed he committed the crimes that we've documented in the introduction and you've explained to us?
Let's look at the Liam Kelly murder. Anthony Campbell, arrested and convicted and charged and convicted, okay, because he called young Liam on to his death. So that's enough to the offence of murder, albeit the man who pulled the trigger has not been arrested. So as far as Merseyside Police are concerned, they can say that solved that crime. And they can say, we did our job. Well, actually, you didn't, because you bailed Kevin Parle, didn't you? And then you got to turn around and say he's wanted. But now, let's look at Lucy's murder. 2 men charged and put on trial for Lucy's murder. And to the huge embarrassment of Merseyside police, those two men got acquitted. Now, if Parle were to be arrested, surely there would have to be additional, new, fresh, compelling evidence, or else, surely the same end story would happen if Parle gets put on trial with the same evidence that Downes and Bradley were acquitted upon.
But do we know what evidence they've got against Parle? Did all that come out in the trial of the other two?
What did happen was that the judge said at the end of the trial, if Parle had been in the dock alongside them, he would also have been acquitted. So there was no specific evidence relating to Parle that was any stronger than that against Downes and Bradley. So we know that because that was in the judge's closing remarks. A lot of the evidence around Downes and Bradley was based on mobile phone triangulation, but it was in its early days. That kind of evidence was in its early days, but it was picked apart by the defence, and the case got slung out at half-time, actually. After the prosecution had presented their case, the judge said, you don't even have to answer this because it's just not sufficient.
But that telephone evidence, the data will still be there somewhere, won't it? And
yes,
can be better interrogated so many years on.
Quite possibly. Quite possibly.
This is one of the things that rejuvenated the Madeleine McCann investigation after many years, that the interrogation of the phone data at the time in 2007 was done poorly by the Portuguese police. Scotland Yard got involved some years later and came up with much more evidence of mobile telephone traffic. So in the same way, perhaps that could be applied to any new prosecution.
Possibly, but if it doesn't, and Parle doesn't even end up getting charged, then there's going to be more embarrassment for Merseyside police as a result of that.
One oddity, Peter, about Parle is his very distinctive appearance. He's very tall, isn't he, with red or gingery hair, quite a distinctive scar on his face. I know people can change their appearance, but it seems strange after all these years that there perhaps haven't been more sightings, because I'm guessing he's not an easy bloke to hide.
It's only a 1-inch scar, and cosmetic surgeons can perform miracles these days. And believe you me, if Kevin Parle is still at large, I'd put my house on it that he's had some appearance-altering surgery. But let's just remember the various rewards that have been put up for Kevin Parle in recent times, £20,000 and then more mention of £10,000. The villains that he associates with will spend that in a night. That's just a night out for them. Okay, and now let's look at people like the Kinahans, for example, who have got $5 million rewards on their heads, and they have still not been captured.
This is the Irish family who've been widely written about and who exist largely in Spain and are allegedly caught up in gang warfare and drug cartels there.
And Dubai, and I went to Dubai as part of my hunt for Kevin Parle because I received information that he had been there during his time on the run. So when we look at global, serious and organised crime, if you can have a $5 million bounty on your head and you can have the might of the US state trying to find you and you can't be found, it's perhaps not that surprising that Kevin Parle's not been nicked yet.
What do you think it will take, Peter, finally to capture him after all this time? Is it going to be good old-fashioned police work, or do you think it might need somebody to betray him and say, yeah, he is down the road?
Well, if he's alive, I think he will have to outlive his usefulness. And I think at that point, the clock is ticking for him. He may have outlived his usefulness all those years ago and consequently been chopped up and thrown into the sea, or killed because he ripped off drug dealers in London, or any of the other urban myths, shall I say, that are bouncing around out there about him. So he may already be done and dusted and long departed from this planet. But if he isn't, and if he's still drawing breath, then the minute he outlasts his usefulness, then he will either meet his maker or be sold down the river and the handcuffs will be slapped on.
I wonder if he's heard about your hunt for him.
Undoubtedly. The podcast that we did, it was a BBC podcast. It was the most popular true crime podcast made by the BBC, I think, in 2020 or 2021. Last time I heard it, it had over 4 million downloads and counting. I'd been to every notable spot that he'd been mentioned in Spain. thousands of flyers and posters attached to lampposts, other premises where people that I was told were connected to him, people who have subsequently been arrested. I've thrown laminated posters that were weighted down in envelopes so the wind didn't blow them away. I've thrown them over the walls of their fortresses and all their hideouts and those kind of places. The man who owned the property where Parle was spinning in the back garden, I've spoken to him. I really upset him. He knew of my hunt for Kevin Parle. Kevin Parle, if he's still alive, he undoubtedly knows that I had a go at trying to fight him, and I'm sure he can split his sides when he laughs about how I, quite frankly, manifestly failed, but at least I bloody well tried.
You said you started your personal hunt for Kevin Parle because you were dismayed at the lack of the public awareness of this man who was wanted for 2 terrible murders. Is it still your impetus, the fact that the awareness still needs to be out there?
Yes, but I've sat down with Gary Campbell many times, who was Lucy Hargreaves' partner and the father of their 3 children. And I will, of course, have to keep certain things discreet. But the damage that has been caused by the 3 men that went through the front door of Lucy's house, shot her dead, doused her with petrol, burnt that house down, is astonishing and wide-reaching and ongoing. Utterly, utterly appalling. So if anybody's got any information, I'm very easy to contact. Website, social media, all that kind of stuff. And I will still receive information. And I still give the most solemn undertaking never to betray a source ever.
You spent many years working undercover, Peter. Have you dug deep into all the things you learned as a detective over the years as part of this hunt?
What I did have to do on some occasions, as I was walking up to certain front doors of premises where I was told there was armed gangsters had been there, and it wasn't just the Val del Este place, I had to take a deep breath and summon up some courage. That's what I had to do. And of course, I would modestly put forward that working undercover sometimes required more than a smidgen of courage.
How close do you think, Peter, that you've come to Kevin Parle?
OK, that visit to Val del Este, and I make no apology for mentioning it again and again and again. Not only did we go to that villa and leaflet that, we went to the other part of the estate where we were told he'd had that flat that I mentioned, and there was 268 letterboxes, I think, all related to the flats. It's one of those resorts where the letterboxes are kept together in one big block. So 268 flyers went in there. Then we chatted up the gardener, and there may have been an element of subterfuge, and he let us in. So we got in, and we went around that part of the estate. And we did some more leafleting, and we did some door knocking, and we looked around, and we poked our nose about, and we spoke to anybody that we saw walking past, albeit there was very, very little foot traffic and even less vehicle traffic. It was really quiet. We went to the restaurants, we went to the estate management company, we went to the estate agents, we went everywhere. As we pulled out of this very quiet estate in our rental car, we were heading towards a roundabout, which is right by the entrance. Then you come onto the public road, a little narrow road that leads down to a bigger roundabout on one of the big main roads in Spain, from where you can travel wherever you want. As we're going down this small public road, and it's only enough room for one car in either direction, all of a sudden we are overtaken. Vroom, 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 vroom. 4 high-powered vehicles going like the clappers. They really were. It was astonishing. And we'd seen barely any cars moving around during the entire day we'd been there. And I looked at my mate who was driving. I said, I reckon he's in the back of one of them. And he said, seriously? I said, well, look at it. They're all high-powered motors, you know, SUVs and all of that kind of thing. Gangsters' vehicle of choice so often. I said, it's a few minutes after we've left, so the coast is relatively clear. It's heading down towards the main road. He could well be in there. Anyway, we discussed it and got back to our hotel, and that was sort of, the day's work. 10 days later, my phone rang. I had a little burner phone that I carried around with me all the time for Parle. I've kind of got the ache with carrying two phones permanently, so it's no longer open. But again, website, social media, all that, I'm easily contactable. 10 days later, that burner phone rang, and it was a man who wanted to remain anonymous. And he said, Peter, you really don't want to hear what I've got to say. I said, go on. He said, you got close. He said, you got very close. But somebody tipped him off.
Peter, if you found him now, A, what would you say to him? And B, because you're retired now, what can you do? Could you make a citizen's arrest? How would it work if you managed to track him down?
Kevin Parle's 20 years younger than me, right? And half a foot bigger than me, right? I am not going to make a citizen's arrest. He could turn me into a crowd in the blink of an eye. Okay, my street fighting days are long behind me.
Oh, they don't look like they are.
Well, you're very kind. Flattery will get you everywhere.
Exactly.
Yeah, I don't have a warrant card. I don't have any handcuffs, and I handed him my pink ticket. Yeah, it was a pink ticket back in my day to carry a firearm. That's how long ago it was. So, of course, it would be law enforcement, and they would have to be notified.
But would it be like surveilling him and then telling law enforcement where he is? Is that how it would work?
If Kevin Parle's alive, he knows what I look like, so I would not be able to carry out any covert surveillance on him. Again, it would have to be in the hands of law enforcement, and that's what I've done throughout. I've been consistent. If it's come in and it's credible, I haven't handed them the stuff where somebody who's been very well-intentioned has said, I saw him driving the number 123 bus in Doncaster this morning. And there has been an element of that, and I'm not ridiculing it, and it's very kind of people to be public-spirited. But I haven't pestered them with that, because I know he's not driving a bus in Doncaster. But, yeah, if it was credible, what would they do? Would they do anything on it? I've handed so much information to them, and it's bounced between them and the National Crime Agency, and the National Crime Agency have said, it's Merseyside's responsibility, and Merseyside have said, you need to speak to the NCA, and all this kind of stuff.
Merseyside police are near the end of a 2-year review into their investigation into Lucy's murder and Liam's murder. Any idea what that review might be throwing up?
I did get a phone call just a few months ago to say that somebody in law enforcement who specialises in technical inquiries, IT if you will, had been asked to do some work on him. So in that regard, my soul was lifted. Oh, maybe they are doing something. Are they really, really determined to do something? Virtually nothing would make me happier than to turn on the telly one day, or turn on the radio, or pick up the paper, or invariably pick up my phone and see Kevin Parle nicked.
This is a story that you're going to potentially share when you hit the road. Tell us a little bit about your new show, Peter, that you're heading off on, your tour across the country.
Yes, thank you. In 2026, my theatre tour show starts. I'm doing over 110 dates, the length and breadth of the country, coming to a theatre near you.
I've got my tickets.
Thank you,
I need
Martin.
to get mine.
Thank you. It's called The Makings of a Murderer, the Undercover Detective. The first part will be tales from my undercover career and about a couple of murders that I solved and how I did that. And the second half will focus on another major project that I've worked on for over 20 years, which is the unsolved murder of a 30-year-old father of 2 young children called Alistair Wilson, who was gunned down on his front doorstep in Nairn in the Scottish Highlands on Sunday the 28th of November 2004. There's been 2 stories about that case in the newspapers only this week. There's an awful lot going on, and there's an awful lot I'm going to declare, and I strongly suspect that when I'm performing the show in Scotland, there'll be Police Scotland officers sitting in the audience taking notes. Trust me, they won't get complimentaries. They'll have to pay like everybody else.
That case sounds like another subject for our podcast at some stage.
It does, doesn't it? It does. Peter, thank you so much. Your dedication to the Kevin Parle story and the Lucy Hargreaves case is absolutely remarkable, and it's brilliant to hear what you've been doing. Martin's already got his ticket for your show. I'll be buying mine. I'm coming to Ealing, I think, is the nearest to me. Thank you very much for joining us.
And can we please remember young Liam, only 16 when his life was snuffed out as well. May Liam and Lucy rest in peace.
Thank you. Thank you, Peter, for sharing your insights.
Thank you.
Martin, it's quite something to hear Peter Bleksley talk about this. It really underlines how extraordinary this case is, 20 years on with the prime suspect still on the run.
Yes, and don't forget that the police are still looking for evidence that will help them prosecute and convict the 2 others who are thought to have been involved in Lucy's murder. In all my years reporting crime, I struggled to recall a manhunt quite like this one. Kevin Parle now has been evading capture for almost half his life. It's one of the longest running fugitive hunts in Britain. And as much as it fascinates those of us in journalism, you can't forget the human cost. Lucy Hargreaves' family has spent 2 decades now without answers or justice. For Merseyside Police too, Lucy's case is an unsolved murder. They don't want it to join the cold case files permanently.
You'd think really in the modern world with all the technology, border checks, international police cooperation, that it'd be nearly impossible to hide for so long. But Parle seems to be proof that with money, fake IDs, perhaps access to a criminal network, it is possible.
It is, especially if, as Peter suggested, he's been useful to other criminals abroad. He might have been given new identities, shuttled between safe houses. And every year that passes, it gets harder in some ways to resolve the case. Memories fade, witnesses age. But it also gets easier in other ways because allegiances can falter, and people who were once afraid might feel safer to talk after enough time has passed.
You have to wonder if Kevin Parle ever truly relaxes. He's had 20 years looking over his shoulder. That's a long time, isn't it?
Yes, but as long as he's out there, potentially dangerous, it's also a public safety issue. Who knows what Parle has been involved in while he's been on the run? It's unlikely he's been living a quiet, honest life under an alias. People like Parle don't usually retire from crime while they're on the run.
I suppose the hope now, Martin, is that with all the renewed attention, I think your report got around 250,000 impressions for Sky, the 20th anniversary peg, the reward, that perhaps maybe someone will finally speak up.
That's the great hope. Most fugitives are caught because somebody decides to talk, even after many years. We've seen fugitives caught after a long time. It does happen. Sometimes all it takes is a knock on the wrong door, a sudden illness that brings them to a hospital, or a former ally who decides to make a confession. One day, maybe when he least expects it, Kevin Parle could be found. Sooner or later, justice tends to catch up. There's no statute of limitations on murder, whether it's 20 years or 50. If Kevin Parle is alive and can be found, he can expect to face trial. For Lucy Hargreaves' sake, for her children and her family, let's hope he does one day face justice.
And if any of our listeners do have, by chance, a tip, no matter how small, then they can contact Crime Stoppers completely anonymously. £10,000 is on offer for information that leads to Parle's arrest. We'll put the link in our show notes. Hey listeners, your support means everything to us. If you're enjoying the podcast, please take a moment to leave us a review. It helps us grow, reach new listeners, and keep bringing you the stories you love. This episode is brought to you by Audio Bleach Global. Our producer is Russell Barnes, with audio production by Andrew Chappell. The original score was composed by Chap Mannequin, artwork by Bleached, executive produced by Lee Mann. Follow True Criminals on Instagram at true.criminals and on YouTube at youtube.com/@true-criminals. For exclusive content and ways to support the show, visit us at patreon.com/truecriminals. For partnership opportunities, please contact us at contact@audiobleachglobal.com.